6:17 a.m. Gulf Standard Time, Kuwait International Airport. A fuel storage tank operated by the Kuwait Aviation Fueling Company erupts in a column of orange fire. Emergency vehicles are already rolling across the tarmac before the smoke has even turned black. The fire is massive. The damage, initial reports say, is significant. Kuwait's Civil Aviation Authority is already issuing statements, calling it a blatant assault, confirming that drones targeted fuel tanks belonging to KAFCO, triggering a large fire at the site. But here's the detail that no one is leading with. The detail that should be the entire story. That drone got through. On Thursday, 2 of 9 drones that Iran is suspected of launching evaded Kuwait's air defense systems. 9 drones launched, 7 shot down, 2 made it. 1 hit a residential building, the other hit the airport. There's a Patriot missile battery at Ali al-Salem Air Base, 40 kilometers away. There are Kuwaiti National Guard interceptors. There are radars. There is a layered billion-dollar US-built defense architecture over this country. And one $35,000 Iranian drone threaded the needle, burned the fuel, walked right through. That is not an accident. That is a signal. Signal number 1. Now, before we talk about what that drone is, who built it, and why it matters for every city in the Gulf, from Manama to Dubai, there's a third person in the room at this story that we're not going to name yet. Someone who is, right now, sitting in a building in Muscat, Oman, reading intelligence reports about this strike. Someone whose next move in the next 72 hours will determine whether this war ends or whether it becomes something the world has not seen in a generation. Hold that name. We'll come back to it. Let's start at the beginning. Not February 28th when the bombs fell on Tehran. Go back further. Go back to the math. The Shahed 136 is a loitering munition, a kamikaze drone. Each unit is estimated to cost between $20,000 and $50,000, a price comparable to that of a mid-range automobile. Yet intercepting such drones frequently requires missile systems costing millions of dollars per shot. That is the equation. That is the trap. While the price of one Shahed is estimated to be $30,000 to $50,000, one interceptor can cost 10 times that or more while exhausting already dwindling stockpiles. Kelly Grieco, a senior fellow at the Stimson Center in Washington, calculated the ratio. For every $1 Iran spent manufacturing a Shahed drone, it cost the UAE about $20 to $28 to intercept it. Think about that. $28 spent to stop $1 worth of threat. Iran has thousands of these drones, thousands, and they can build more every week. Iran is understood to have a large stockpile of Shahed drones and the production capacity to build hundreds more every week. Most of those production facilities are underground. Battle damage assessments have not been completed. No one in Washington can tell you with confidence how many drones Iran still has. The US produces only about 600 Patriot interceptors annually. Iran is launching hundreds of drones a week. You do not need a PhD in mathematics to understand where that curve is heading. Here's what nobody is telling you about the Kuwait airport fire. The Patriot system, the PAC-2, the PAC-3, these are extraordinary machines. They are designed to kill ballistic missiles traveling at hypersonic speed. They lock on, they accelerate, they execute a hit-to-kill intercept in the upper atmosphere. They are, without question, among the finest military technologies ever produced. But the Shahed drone flies at 185 kilometers per hour, 115 miles an hour. That is slower than a commercial helicopter. That is slower than a high-speed train. It flies low. It flies quiet. It has a piston engine, the kind you'd find on a lawnmower or a small aircraft. After reaching cruising altitude, the drone flies toward its target, often at low altitude to evade radar detection. Radar is designed to track threats, but a slow-moving, low-flying, propeller-driven object that hugs the terrain, that confuses the geometry. The Patriot radar is looking up and out. The Shahed is skimming the ground. The defense system built to stop nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles is being challenged by something that costs less than a used car. And now the upgrades. This is where it gets serious. Newer variants deployed between 2024 and 2026 reportedly include anti-jamming modules. Iran has integrated the Nasir anti-jamming system, designed to reduce vulnerability to electronic warfare measures. Enhanced inertial navigation capabilities allow the drone to continue its mission even if satellite signals are disrupted. Some models are believed to use commercial mobile networks to receive mid-flight course corrections, enabling operators to redirect the drone if necessary. Let that sink in. Some of these drones can receive a text message mid-flight. An operator somewhere, in a bunker, on a laptop, can look at the drone's camera feed and redirect it toward a new target. In real time, over a commercial 4G network, the same network you use to stream video on your phone. But here's the catch, the biggest catch of all. There may be a Russian fingerprint on this. Open-source analysis of drone debris and video footage from the UAE indicates that a Jiran 2 drone, a Russian-produced variant derived from the Iranian Shahed 136, may have been used during the March 2026 retaliation. Serial markings suggest the system originated from the Kupol plant in Izhevsk, rather than Iran's domestic production lines, and incorporated Russian modifications such as the Kometa-M jam-resistant navigation system. The Kometa-M, that is not an Iranian product. That is a Russian electronic warfare module, integrated into a drone that flew over Kuwait, over Bahrain, over Dubai. The previously one-directional relationship, Iran giving drones to Russia, has now flipped. Russia is giving upgraded versions back to Iran. The student has become the teacher, and the teacher has enrolled in an advanced class. As of late spring 2025, Russia has been producing around 170 Garan-2 drones per day. 170 per day. The Garan-2 is the Russian-built, upgraded cousin of the Shahed. Iran has access to this production pipeline, which means the drone that burned the Kuwait airport fuel tank may have been assembled in Izhevsk, Russia, shipped to Iran, launched from Iranian territory, and guided by Russian navigation software. This is not a regional conflict anymore. The supply chain of this war runs through Moscow. Now, back to the man in Muscat. Here's who it is. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Al Jazeera that he receives messages from U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff directly. I receive messages from Witkoff directly, as before, and this does not mean that we are in negotiations. Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, the Manhattan real estate developer turned Middle East fixer. The man Trump sent to broker ceasefires in Gaza and Ukraine is now the last human thread connecting Washington to Tehran in a shooting war. And he is receiving messages, not meeting, not negotiating, just receiving messages, from Iran's foreign minister while Iranian drones are burning airports in Kuwait. This is what shuttle diplomacy looks like in 2026. Not Henry Kissinger in a limousine between Cairo and Jerusalem. It's a text chain between a real estate agent and a foreign minister, while buildings are on fire. A senior diplomatic source told Al Jazeera that Iran had received a 15-point plan from the U.S. that was aimed at ending the war. The plan included proposals ranging from calls on Iran to commit to never acquiring a nuclear weapon, to limiting its missile stockpile in both range and quantity. 15 points. Iran has not publicly accepted a single one. Araghchi said the trust level is at 0. We don't see honesty. 0. Not low, not damaged. 0. And yet the messages keep coming, because both sides understand the alternative to messages. The alternative is the Strait of Hormuz, fully closed, permanently. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, forming a seaway passage between Iran and Oman. Its 2 unidirectional sea lanes facilitate the transit of around 20 million barrels of oil per day, representing roughly 20% of global seaborne oil trade. 20 million barrels per day, gone. On 19 March, Dubai crude oil prices reached $166, their highest on record. And that was before Trump's April 2nd national address from the White House Cross Hall, in which he told the world the U.S. was not going to be the one to reopen it. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for May rose more than 11%, or $11.42, to close at $111.54 per barrel after Trump's speech. 11%, in a single trading session, after a single speech. The average price of gasoline in the U.S. passed $4 for the first time since 2022. Now hear the domino. If the strait stays closed for 60 days, not permanently, just 60 days, oil analysts are privately telling clients Brent crude crosses $150. At $150 oil, aviation fuel becomes a crisis. Shipping costs double. Food prices spike globally because 20 to 30% of internationally traded fertilizers, nitrogen, urea, ammonia, normally transit the Strait of Hormuz. No fertilizer shipments, crop shortages, price inflation in every grocery store on every continent. The S&P 500, which has already been rattled by the war premium, faces a potential 15 to 20% correction, according to market analysts who've modeled prolonged Hormuz closure scenarios. Gas at $4 today becomes gas at $6, then $7. Then the political calculus inside the White House changes entirely. But here's the catch, the second one, the one that flips the entire narrative on its head. Trump says Iran is defeated. Trump says the regime has been eviscerated. But the new supreme leader of Iran is not Araghchi, the pragmatist sending polite messages to Witkoff. The new supreme leader is Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the previous supreme leader Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated in February by a U.S.-Israeli joint operation. The junior Khamenei is considered even more extreme and has been described as his father on steroids. The hardliner who was supposed to be weakened by the killing of his father is now running the country. And he is surrounded by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, whose Navy commander told the world on April 1st, in a statement responding to Trump's ceasefire claims, that the strait is firmly and decisively under the control of Iranian forces and will not be open to the enemies of this nation through the ridiculous spectacle by the President of the United States. This is the IRGC speaking, not the foreign ministry, not the elected government, the IRGC, the parallel military state within the Iranian state, the organization that has launched, by conservative count, over 1,500 drones at Gulf targets since February 28th. The UAE alone absorbed the largest volume of attacks, 1,422 detected drones and 246 missiles between March 1st and March 8th, roughly 55% of all recorded strikes in the dataset. And as of March 31st, the UAE has intercepted and destroyed 433 ballistic missiles, 1,977 drone attacks, and 19 cruise missiles fired from Iran. Nearly 2,000 drone interceptions in one country in 1 month. Those are the numbers that define this war. Meanwhile, the math problem for the defenders gets worse by the day. Some reports suggest that America's supply of air defense missiles could face shortages, potentially amplifying the significance of drones if the conflict drags on. The US currently produces about 600 Patriot interceptors per year. Iran can build hundreds of Shaheds per week. The asymmetry is not just financial, it is industrial. It is a production race that America, by every honest assessment, is currently losing. This is why Zelensky made a phone call that almost nobody is talking about. Ukraine has become one of the world's leading manufacturers of Shahed killers, low-cost interceptor drones designed to shoot down Russian attack drones before they reach their targets. Priced at about $1,000 to $2,000 each, a fraction of the several $million it costs to manufacture, transport, and fire a high-tech US interceptor, Ukrainian manufacturers are producing thousands per month. And now, in a geopolitical twist that would have been unthinkable 18 months ago, the Gulf states are calling Kyiv. The UAE requested 5,000 interceptor drones from Ukrainian manufacturer TAF Industries. Qatar requested 2,000, and Kuwait also showed interest. Ukraine, a country fighting for its own survival with Western weapons, is now becoming the counter-drone supplier of choice for the richest monarchies in the world. Because Ukraine learned what Washington refused to learn. You cannot stop a flood with a dam that costs $4 million per sandbag. The so what is simple. Iran has fired more than 1,000 Shaheds at Gulf targets since Operation Epic Fury began. The massed attacks can overwhelm expensive missile defenses, and the Kuwait friendly fire incident shows that bolting together a multi-layered air defense under fire creates coordination risks that can be deadlier than the drones themselves. That friendly fire incident. 3 American F-15Es shot down by a Kuwaiti F-A-18. The crews survived, but barely. It happened because the sky over Kuwait was so full of drones, missiles, interceptors, and aircraft that the identification friend or foe systems couldn't keep up. The chaos was the weapon, and Iran designed the chaos deliberately. Now, here's what's happening in Muscat right now while you're watching this video. Both the Trump administration and Tehran have expressed a desire for a diplomatic resolution to the conflict, but their respective demands appear far apart, and Iran denies any direct negotiations have taken place. Iran's President Pezeshkian wrote an open letter directly to the American people, posted to X in English, saying that his country had tried to negotiate before the US halted diplomacy and launched the war. Trump responded on Truth Social by claiming Iran had asked for a ceasefire. Tehran called this false and baseless. The IRGC issued a separate statement. Witkoff's messages to Arachi are reportedly still flowing. And somewhere in Muscat, Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi, the man who mediated 5 rounds of nuclear talks, the man who kept both sides talking even as bombs fell, is drafting a protocol, a document, a piece of paper that might be the most important piece of paper in the world right now. Iran was reported to be working with Oman to draft a protocol to monitor transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Monitor transit, not open, not guarantee, monitor. That is the language of a negotiation in its very earliest, most fragile stage. 2 words that say nothing but mean everything. Because if that protocol becomes real, if Oman can certify that Iranian vessels are monitoring the passage of neutral ships, then the cover exists for the IRGC to step back, quietly, without losing face, and oil tankers can start moving again, and Brent crude drops from $111 to $85 in a week, and the political pressure on Trump to escalate further, which his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is reportedly hungry to do, evaporates. One source familiar with Hegseth's current mindset told CNN that he believes blowing shit up is the best way for him to keep his job. That is the internal friction that could blow up any deal before it begins. Hegseth on one side, Trump sending ceasefire signals on Truth Social on the other, and Netanyahu in Washington last week, the third act of internal sabotage, briefing Witkoff that Iran cannot be trusted, that any deal is a trap, that the only acceptable outcome is full nuclear dismantlement. White House envoy Steve Witkoff met in Israel with Prime Minister Netanyahu and a group of senior Israeli defense officials to coordinate positions ahead of the talks with Iran. Netanyahu emphasized that Iran can't be trusted. The Israeli Prime Minister is simultaneously coordinating with the U.S. envoy, while also making clear he wants no deal the Iranians would actually accept. The diplomatic process is being shaped by the party with the most to gain from its failure. And yet, here's the signal buried inside the noise. The 2026 U.S. Worldwide Threat Assessment published in March does not indicate that Iran had made a decision to weaponize its nuclear program or restart activities necessary to build a bomb. That is the official U.S. intelligence community's own assessment, published in March, after the war began. Iran has not, according to American intelligence, decided to build a nuclear weapon. It has 60% enriched uranium. It has the centrifuges at Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. But the decision to weaponize has not been made. Which means there is still a gap between where Iran is and where the red line is. And inside that gap, that narrow, dangerous, rapidly shrinking gap, there is space for a deal. But here's the catch, the third one. And this one is the one that keeps the diplomats up at night. By the time the third round of talks ended in Geneva, Trump had likely already made the choice to go to war. It is unlikely that any outcome short of complete Iranian capitulation to U.S. demands at the negotiating table would have averted the military strikes. The Arms Control Association reviewed recordings and transcripts from multiple U.S. negotiating sessions and reached a damning conclusion. Witkoff's failure to learn the nuclear file and surround himself with technical expertise necessary to negotiate an effective deal has been a diplomatic disservice to U.S. and international non-proliferation goals. The lead American negotiator did not understand the technical parameters of Iranian enrichment. He offered Iran free fuel for its research reactors as a concession, not understanding that Iran's insistence on domestic enrichment is a sovereignty issue, not a fuel cost issue. Arachi reportedly replied that free fuel was an assault on our dignity, and Witkoff interpreted the rejection not as a misunderstanding, but as proof that Iran was acting in bad faith. And Trump took that interpretation to the Situation Room, and the bombs followed. Now, 34 days later, with Trump's approval rating at 35%, just 34% of Americans approving of the decision to take military action in Iran, gas prices above $4 a gallon, and markets pricing in a prolonged global economic disruption, the same envoy is back in the message chain. Still no technical experts, still no nuclear specialists, still the same conceptual framework that failed the first time, and the drones keep flying. The GCC Secretary General called on the UN Security Council to authorize the use of force to protect the Strait of Hormuz from Iranian attacks. Bahrain has proposed a draft resolution that would greenlight states to use all necessary measures to assure free transit through the strait. The Gulf Cooperation Council is asking the United Nations for permission to go to war in the strait. That is how serious this is. The world's most important oil choke point, through which flows the energy that powers Japan, South Korea, India, China, Germany, France, is a contested combat zone. And the U.S. Navy, the most powerful naval force in human history, has not yet sailed through it, because of Iranian missiles and drones. The mighty U.S. Navy has yet to sail through the critical oil choke point because of Iran's missiles and drones. Signal number 2. The superpower's most feared instrument of force has been deterred by $35,000 flying lawnmowers launched from truck beds. The strategic equation of the entire 21st century has been rewritten in the waters between Iran and Oman. So where does this leave us on Friday, April 3rd, 2026? Let's be precise. Oil is at $111 a barrel. Gas in the U.S. is above $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022. U.S. futures are down more than 1.2%. Over 40 countries convened by video conference Thursday to discuss how to clear the strait. Trump said the U.S. will be helpful, but that allies should take the lead. Britain's Keir Starmer is hosting emergency calls. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif is on the phone with Tehran. Qatar and Oman are pushing for immediate diplomacy, while Saudi Arabia and the UAE want the air campaign to continue until Iran's ballistic missile factories are rubble. Unlike Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Qatar and Oman favor diplomatic efforts to end the conflict as soon as possible, and are not pushing for the U.S.-Israeli air campaign to continue. The coalition is fracturing. The consensus that held the Gulf together for the first 33 days is developing cracks. And in Kuwait International Airport, the fire at the KAFCO fuel tanks has been extinguished. The runway is being assessed. The investigators are picking through the debris of a drone that cost $35,000 and just disrupted one of the Gulf's primary aviation hubs for a morning. The Patriot battery 40 kilometers away did not fire, did not detect it in time, did not intercept it. The drone flew low, flew slow, flew quiet, and burned. This is the story of this war. Not the B-2 bombers that struck Iran's enrichment facilities, not the carrier strike groups in the Gulf. The story is a $35,000 kamikaze drone built on a German lawnmower engine, navigated with Russian anti-jamming software, launched from a truck, guided by a 4G text message, and aimed at the fuel tanks that power the planes that fly the trade routes that sustain the economy that keeps the lights on for 2 billion people. And it is getting through. The next 24 to 72 hours are binary. There is no middle ground. Either Oman produces that Hormuz transit protocol, Arachi picks up the phone instead of texting, Witkoff gets on a plane to Muscat, and some version of a framework, even an imperfect, temporary, face-saving framework, creates the conditions for the first tanker to sail through the strait under nominal Iranian monitoring. Or Mujtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader described as his father on steroids, listens to the IRGC generals, looks at Trump's 35% approval rating, looks at the $111 oil price, looks at the divided coalition, and concludes that time is on Iran's side. That every week of closed strait is a week of economic damage that erodes U.S. political will. That the drones can outlast the diplomacy. Deal or bombs. Open strait or burning tankers. A phone call from Muscat or a missile from the USS George H.W. Bush. Those are the choices sitting on the table at this hour, on this Friday in April 2026. The world is watching. The tarmac at Kuwait International Airport still smells like jet fuel and smoke, and the next drone is already airborne.